Any questions for staff? I mean, just to simplify it even more, I mean, so if we wanted to take $49,000, or if we want to take all $328,000 and put it towards youth employment, we can't.
You cannot.
Address it. And so that's thus the reasons why they're kind of capped where they are. I guess if Mr. Gaines and Mr. Fade, I guess you could, if you don't mind just walking us through kind of the process, you know, when a request comes. I mean, obviously council hears it, but you guys get some straight to you. So, I mean, how do you do that? How do you vet, you know, all the applicants that you get? And if you just kind of walk us through that, just to educate us on it.
Good afternoon, sir.
Sure.
Council. Basically, I'm gonna walk down each one of our projects and what we basically do with them. For administration, that's basically to pay the staff, benefits, pay the staff benefits, pay the staff. Demolition, like city manager said, we do that about every year. Demolition, that's one of the key things we go to community meetings, you know, blight, slum. And we do that every year. And the city, a couple of years back, won a recognition for that. About every 3 years, we give money for historic preservation. That's facade grants for downtown. And it usually, like I said, be about 3 years before they ask for any more money. And the reason they're on there this year, they called me and said they had an applicant that were gonna take the rest of their money. And I think the last time I gave them money was about 3 years ago, that they needed, you know, at least $10,000 worth of funds.
Let me mention one thing. So historic preservation, you see, is under that same slum and blight area.
Yeah.
The reason for that is if we go all the way back to the beginning of downtown revitalization, you know, you have a historic overlay of the central business district area. But when we did the TIF, the tax increment finance district down, it's the historic overlay of the downtown plus a little bit more in an area. So it's a finite map. And the reason why it's done that way is a part of having a tax increment finance district. You must have a redevelopment plan. In other words, how do you make it better? So where there was blight before this plan, that was recognized by HUD when we started the facade grant program, and it fit under there. So it was approved, fit under there. And then back to what Mr. Gaines was saying is actually because we could use all the money to the mayor's example, like for youth employment, we could use all the money that we get in a year for demolition, but we can't. There's only so much we can put there. So we try to measure that out. We could use $40,000 for historic preservation, but we just don't have it. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Remembering again, it has to be in that redevelopment area, which is a hard boundary. And that's recognized by HUD as the redevelopment area that was also used for the TIF. So it has to be in that boundary. We've had requests just on the other side of the street from the boundary, and we're not allowed to use it there. So we'd love to.
Tell the boundary if you don't mind.
So the boundary is right between, help me with this, it is right on the other side of Central Carolina Nursing School. So our
That's
water
Bartlett?
department is outside. That side of the street is outside. The nursing school is inside. That's the boundary of the request that we've been continuing to get. So
Bartlett down to Calhoun, and then Harvin over here, over to Washington.
Right.
Who controls the facade grant? Because he said they contacted him and said, we need more money.
yeah, so the downtown department. So we've since we've been doing downtown revitalization, those requests, multiple requests come in to the downtown department. And it can come through different ways. It can come to the downtown board. It'll end up coming through Mr. Owens's office for sure. But sometimes they'll reach out to the downtown department, and a lot of times we'll find out, hey, we've got a lot of pent up demand. People say, I'm ready to do this big project. Is there any money to leverage? In the good old days, when we had a good bit more money in the big pot, meaning we had more in historic preservation, we could leverage those facade grants. Maybe they could be as high as, you remember the highest?
At one point, I think that we got up to $50,000, so you could get a $10,000 facade grant, but now with getting 10,000, we've kind of got it dialed down to 2,500, so we could at least help as many people as possible.
So if someone in the district applied, there would be a competitive process depending on, just like most of our downtown RFPs, like what do we get the most bang for the buck, and try to use that. So we've done this before. It might be interesting for council again to do a complete list of all the facade grants we've done in the district. You'll say, oh yeah, that one looks really nice. But what you'll see each time is there's a lot more private investment, but basically our grants just sort of leverage. So like if we give 2,500, maybe you see $10,000 worth of work. Or if we give 10,000, maybe you see $50,000 worth of work. But that's where the they is the downtown department.
That's how.
It's still coming up through Howie right now.
Yeah.
Can that amount be increased?
It can be with the total not exceeding of that general area, just because again, we could take more from LMI benefit, but there's only so much we can do because of that separation of LMI benefit versus not.
Even if I may one more.
Yes, sir.
Who determines what houses get demolished? How does that work?
Who does that? So we'll do that with codes enforcement. Codes enforcement runs the PRIDE program. So they coordinate with community development to make sure, obviously, that the money is spent correctly. We're using all the HUD rules. So we have to build a file. Every time a penny of any of this money is spent, there's a separate file that we have to follow all the rules from Davis-Bacon and all the procurement rules, right down to the, last penny and how it all adds up and how we all pull it down. So the group that actually does that is, so John McCloskey oversees that. So again, just like rehab or anything else, you're getting requests in all the time, and it's sort of a first come, first serve on that. So if we can get the authorization, like right now, we have about $50,000 worth of demolition work to do, but for the money. So we have numerous years looked for demolition money outside of community development, because the process gets up and running and we're out of money. But we have more, as you hear at your neighborhood meetings, we still have more need. So when people sign the waiver, then we're just waiting on the next pot of money, wherever it comes from, to do it.
I don't suppose we can clean up lots with that money.
Lots is not the same, because blight being blighted buildings is kind of, now, when you clean off of a blighted structure, the lot gets cleaned too, but not just a weeded lot necessarily.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Gaines, if you don't, keep going, because I think I probably should have clarified my question a little bit more, but this is flushing it out. So how, the steps that folks take. So someone for historic preservation, obviously it would come through, say Howie's office, then go to
Right.
you. And then so moving, I guess, into housing repair, that's a big one.
Okay.
So how does that, obviously, I know we have our outreach meetings and those types, but do other folks, do they just come in and submit applications in your office? Or I guess expand on that a little bit, please.
That's what they basically do. I have a waiting list, like city manager said, the first come, first serve. At any given time, I probably have about 40 houses on my waiting list. The amount of money that we get, and it's steady, like on a monthly basis, I have 3 or 4 homeowners come in. I never have enough money for all the houses that need to be repaired. But basically, I got a housing board, and I go down the list. When I get I do 10 at a time. I let my housing board approve them. They meet and they rack and stack them based on disability, age, income, the whole 9 yards. But those 10 are done, but they tell me who to do first, second, third, and all 10 will get done. But they prioritize it by disabilities, age, and whatever. finance.
So let me, his housing board is your community development housing board. So this is the board you appoint, and that's what they oversee, and Clarence is accountable to that group for that purpose.
Yes, sir.
And I continue to expand. I know there's been requests and folks showed up at the meeting regarding the mobile homes. And that's where that same housing board, I guess, as advised years ago, I guess to say, I guess in mirroring the state, is that fair? I mean, is that?
What they basically did about 2000, they decided, as far as cost effectiveness, and it said, we don't give it X amount of dollars. Like when we first started off, we was getting about almost $700,000. We could do more. That was before my time. But when I got here, it started going down. And they said with the amount of money we got allocated for housing repair, we get more bang for our bucks doing a solid house, because you rehab that, bring it up to code, it will last long. And whereas mobile homes depreciating value, houses normally, if they're up to stuff, appreciating value. So you get more bang for your buck.
Gotcha.
Question.
Yes, sir.
But that leaves out a lot of people in this city. Some of our areas, as you know, a large portion, if not 50%, are mobile homes. And these folks need some kind of help. And most times, if you live in a mobile home, you don't have the means to fix your home yourself. And I think when we make a decision like that, we leave a lot of folks out of the city's plan to make things better. So they're stuck in these mobile homes. They can't get any help from the city. I know the churches try to help, and some of people in the community try to help. But I don't know what we can do, but I think we need to try to do something. And maybe this is not the program, for people in mobile homes.
To that point, and I'll ask Mr. Gaines to answer too. One thing we say quite a bit when folks come to us, we might not be the one to help them directly, but we are the ones to help them by putting them in the right hands.
Exactly.
So, for instance, you'll notice in this year, United Ministries is not in our list. Before this, United Ministries we would give like $25,000 a year for materials. They would get volunteer labor, and they'd turn the 25 into maybe $100,000 worth of work. They were very fortunate to access a different pot of money where they could actually, instead of using volunteers, which they still do, like in a mobile home, they could actually hire contractors who can work sheet metal for the roofs, and hire those, so they have access to a greater pot. So to your example, currently, if someone needs help, then we can get them to United Ministries, and they can access more money with a contractor to fix their roof. Whereas for us, the reason why this decision was made, by the time we do environmental and everything else, our money is gone, and we have a 5-year backlog. So if somebody came to us today, they just have to wait if we were the only solution. But thank God for United Ministries and others like them, because they can get help. We've seen that already this year.
This decision was made in 2003. What's that, 18 years ago, if my math right, but I'm a lawyer. Sometimes we need to revisit some of these decisions that we made a long time ago, because things tend to change. And I would like us to relook at that again. Not that we can change it anytime soon, but let's not say just because we made a decision almost or nearly 20 years ago, we stuck by that decision. Laws are to be changed. We make laws, then we change laws all the time. Okay. Just a comment.
Yeah, to that point, it's certainly not a law. It's the direction of a board that you guys have given. So if council feels strongly, I'm sure they can let the board know how they feel, and that's done. Again, what our goal is to do is get as much help to our citizens as possible, whether it be us directly or someone else. But this is why we listen and take our direction from council. How you see us go is where we'll go.
Another question. So once you determine a house is to be done, if you have a house in which it needs extensive repair to a point that it could almost be not worth that much repair, it's almost like it's best to start over. Do you run into that, and who makes that decision?
I run into that. I hire a professional to go out and look at every home, and he make that judgment for me. I pay him for that. He's the expert. And it's just like what you're saying, say for instance, the house value is maybe, say, $30,000 in the land, and you go out there and the house is such bad a shape, it might need $70,000. He'll come to me. And all the agencies in Sumter that do housing repair, the COG, the county, all of us do the same thing. They hire experts to go out there and do it. You know,
And that's part of the HUD rules. So what's not to bog you guys down, but I think you'd find it interesting. When we use, there's been a large historical backlog of need for housing rehabilitation. Back before we were an entitlement city, we were successful in competitive grants because we had a large need for housing rehabilitation. So for that reason, when we do environmental assessments by their rules, before we ever can spend the money to fix anything, we have to do environmental assessments, we have to do the construction assessments, and all of that has to be in our file before we ever touch it or spend money on it. So it's very tedious paperwork wise. And again, that's what HUD uses as its rules and regulations, because ultimately we go through the process, we spend city money first, and then we file to get reimbursed from HUD for the money. So it's very important, not only do we do what you ask us to do, but we follow the HUD rules, and each literal box get checked. Is it something that we can do the work on, and then we do it correctly and close the
In the
file.
HUD rules, let me just say, I think, Mr. Gaines, you said there's 480 houses in the backlog right now
4 to 5 years.
in 4 to 5
yeah,
years.
4 to 5 years of housing.
All right, so if someone comes in today and they needed, let's say, desperately, they got a bad leak in their roof, they need a $2,000 shingle job today. Now, 5 years from now, they're gonna need sheetrock work, floor work. That 2,000 is turned into $20,000.
Right.
Is there anything in the HUD rules as far as, oh no, don't, that you can separate the request into those that are, can you satisfy if you got 500 houses in the queue, but there's 150 of them we can fix for $2,000, and then there's 25 that will cost us $50,000. Can you say, I'm going to pull 10 out of this queue every year and 1 out of this, or so that we can somehow get ahead and fix homes before they get in worse shape?
Okay, sir, the city is about the only agency that do full rehab, the whole house. I got 3 other agencies that I partner with, that situation, what they call emergency rehab. You got the county do emergency rehab, the COG do emergency rehab, and Waterloo Community Action do rehab. They send all their people that need major rehab to me. People that need emergency rehab, I forward them to them. Because they can do it probably within, they use state funds, so they probably can do it probably within a month or 2. Whereas, like the city manager said, any property I touch, I got to do an environmental. I got to do a lead inspection.
Oh my God.
Environmental can take anywhere from 6 to 8 months sometimes. I got to do a lead inspection. All that by HUD. HUD telling me I have to do that. So emergency situation is more suitable that people get state money, because they can go in there and do it. Whereas I got to, follow the guidelines with HUD.
And if I may, one of the things that Clarence does very, very well is liaise with other agencies in the community who go to the people that can get the stuff done fast. Working with people like United Ministries to have people go in and Habitat for Humanity. It's not just we sit here, we do our thing. They collaborate with all the other agencies in the city and the county to get these things done and send people to ask the right questions. It's a referral source and a workforce, if that makes sense.
If I may, Mayor, just looking at your entire yearly budget, it's a tiny amount of money to get a lot done. And we're very proud of how much gets done. But I think the point that that Lefford just made is important. We really expand our impact in the needed area and to the clientele we work with, because however we can get the most help, we try to put the people in touch with it. In a perfect world, we would have so much and we would be the sole remedy, but that doesn't really work well. What we found is we want to treat everybody, give them the best treatment as fast as possible. And if that means it's best to fix, in the case of mobile homes, with a different provider to do it more nimbly, then that's what we're going to do and try to help people do that. That's just one example. We've heard some others. So there's literally emergency rehabilitation, as Mr. Gaines says, and then there's rehabilitation, just like you're very familiar in the construction world. Once you fix a certain percentage, now you have to upgrade all the electrical. So the price just goes to a whole different place. So use a lot of common sense and use these rehab specialists to look at the house, knowing what the need is and seeing how can we help folks the best.
Anybody got a question? Any other ones on that? Last one on housing, and we'll move on. I appreciate this. The average cost of repair, I guess, on what's yours. Thanks. Is that, can you,
The
just a
average,
ballpark?
average cost of repair, I would say between $35,000 and $40,000.
Okay. Okay. So that's just not a lot of them, obviously, with $174,000.
No, sir. And the cutoff, the guy I use, the cutoff normally for him is 50,000. And if anything over that, he'll call me. He say, man, it's, I haven't pulled no boards back or nothing. This is just by the eye, the naked eye. It's at least 60 or 70, and
All right. Thank you.
So again, if you, go ahead.
I'm going to ask, how about demolition? What's the average cost for demolition? I see you got 30,000 budget for that. What's the average cost for one?
well, what John do, Mr. McCloskey normally do, he wait till he get about, maybe, I guess he get a good, better bid on them. He get about 5, 6, sometimes 7 houses. And he do a package deal, and it varies. It's causing, if he doing in the commercial with it too, it can be, about $17,000 to $20,000.
So we've been very fortunate. There's a program called the Neighborhood Improvement Program, the NIP. We did 99 houses, all in the city limits, and we did that in a 3-year period. So what we do is we look for, just like with housing, if anyone, we don't have really any other providers doing demolition. We're primary on that. So we just look for other funding sources. So could it be other additional grants outside of community development, or could it be one-time funds? We've actually had funds from what we call program income, like when we've spent HUD funds and money gets paid back and then it goes back and forth. At some point, we can actually use that program income, and it takes years to do that. When we build it up, we've been able in the past to come to council and say, we think this much of the old program income could be used for demolition. This much should be housing rehab, and that's successful too. So we're constantly looking for funds where we know the needs are. Of course, the needs are great. Again, if you look at the numbers and we kind of do the math in our head, $35,000 or $40,000, if we have 174, we're more than 5 years out in that backlog of 50. What happens is sometimes they get help somewhere else before we get to them. Which again is the reason why we drive to work together in a collaborative way. So when we have Fair Housing Month and stuff like that, we do that hand in hand with other agencies because we're all in the same ballgame. We're trying to help folks with housing.
Anyone else on housing? Thank you. Youth employment, so that's, if I read that correctly, summer employment for 40 youth. That's impressive, I guess, for $44,000. That's,
Yes.
how do you choose those folks? Those
Now,
youth?
what we basically do, we give application to the school councils, and they have the kids fill them out. We set the criteria, the income limit and stuff, the household income limit and stuff, and they turn the application, either the councils will turn the application in to us, or sometimes the students and their parents come and turn them into us. And normally, before the pandemic, we was hiring about like 6 to 8 kids. And what we were doing, like the city manager said, that old program fund, we would probably be able to pay for like about 40, And then we kicked in about another 28,000 because the kids that work for businesses, which last year, none of the businesses wanted the kids to work for them, but I still got one company that hired them. We pay half of their salary and the company pay half. So that's how I'm able to hire 68, during the summer. Now, I've been calling, I got a couple calls into the SROs and nobody as of the date was able to tell me whether they got work with the kids or not this summer. Because usually we have 40 work with SROs and Mr. Leffert, he do soft skill training with those kids. And we have 28 work for local businesses.
So let me explain that again for our add on to what Mr. Gaines just said. So there's two programs. One are 14 and 15-year-olds, and that's with the school resource officers, SROs. So it started, it was called the Youth Corps, and we won statewide awards for that. Other cities kind of learned from us. So police officers working with the children. So there's literal work. They'll clean parks, rake things up. But then there's field trips associated with it too, because some kids don't really ever get out of town. So it's some fun doing some group things together. And then we added soft skill training because we heard a lot of that. So we're able to do that ourselves. So the 14 and 15-year-olds, again, student counselors, because all these children have to be low, moderate income, and it's got to be verified. The paperwork has to be right. So the schools really have always helped us with that really well. And then if they're between 16 and 18, we will have local businesses sign on a sub-recipient agreement where we can pay half of the hourly wage up, within parameters, and they pay the other half. The nice thing about that program is even when the summer program's over, if they worked hard, a lot of times those businesses will keep those kids and pay the full part of it. We actually have some full-time employees with companies that started when they were children, and they're full-time employees with the same company. So I'm aware of that because Mr. Wilson, Earl Wilson, told me he has at least one employee that's full-time. So it's kind of neat to see those things work out. But for us, it makes sense just to leverage, to get there again, a little bit of money to get the most kids some health and youth employment. And that's what we've heard from our council for years is let's get as many youth employed as possible. There again, we only have this many, but we work with other people to try to get as many youth employed. County has a real good program. Some other folks have a really good program too.
And then I guess you're moving down to YMCA Youth Services and Boys and Girls Club. Those would be, is it fair to say, very similar in scholarship
Yes,
opportunities?
sir. Scholarship opportunities for kids that can't afford to participate in the program.
Good. So a lot of folks have good ideas that come to the community outreach events and come to council but how do you filter down and go through, say, somebody, maybe a good idea, but may not exactly fit? I mean, I don't know how you could maybe expand on that, Mr. Fade or Gaines. How do you, if it's a good idea, somebody wants to help somebody or be a part of this, but it has to meet certain criteria for HUD. We keep hearing that. I understand that. So
Yes, sir. It have to meet HUD criteria, and it have to be based on the budget that we get. HUD is all about housing. That's the number one thing. So that's why the bang of the buck go to housing. Okay, when you take housing away like 174,000, and regular programs we do every year like demolition, they always talking they need demolition stuff like that. The youth, we always try to look at the program for you because youth is our future. So when you do that, and most of all the requests I got in this year, I think the last one was like, and I got that about 2 days ago, was for like $11,000. But most of them was like buying vans, buying vehicles, leasing a building for them and stuff like that. Hundreds of thousands. And I look at them and we can't afford that, and we can't afford it. And most of them was like that, 75,000, 100,000, to put sprinkler system in my building and all that kind of stuff. We just don't have it.
The cap that we can do is under 50,000, it's 49,000.
Yeah.
And some of like you actually a program, one of the programs was a soft skill pilot program for youth after school, which is similar to what we already do with low to moderate income people. And this is a test which it sounds like a really good program,
Mhm.
but we got tried and true program that works, working with low to moderate income people, 40 to 68 kids. And we're looking at taking care of 25 additional students with that. If you have 50,000 and people asking for 150 to 200,000, that dog just don't hunt.
Mhm.
Trying the best we can to get there, but it's very difficult to get there with that.
The reason why the Youth Corps program ever began was, again, trying to take the money we had and get the most impact with it. So we subsidize it with our own employment force that we have. That's the reason why the school resource officers, obviously school is not in, and those officers will be working somewhere anyway, but they're already accustomed. A lot of times the kids already know these officers and there are already relationships formed. So I find that's a good thing, of course. And then we bring in multiple other folks to work with the group. So we never stop thinking that there can always be improvement to what we have. But to the mayor's question, we listen to council, we listen to all of the requests. We put it through the filters of what could be done under the HUD rules. And then we make the best recommendation based on what we know is important to council, what we know is legal through the HUD rules, and then we serve that up. There's an infinite number of ways you could move 2,500 from here and move it to there. All of that sort of in council's bailiwick. We just wanted to make sure we give you the best draft budget that we can. And then, as council has done in the past, maybe something has come up and we say, we really want to make an impact here. That might mean somebody else has to hold off for a year, and next year we're going to put money there. As long as we're within the HUD guidelines, that is totally within council's purview. That's why the process works the way it does. So much public input, public hearing, and then ultimately, as long as we can do the rules. So we did make sure to have those additional requests that came to us in writing in your folders up there. So please do review those. But like I said, most of those were either higher than what we had, or it was not really able to do incrementally. If you look at like YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, those are fairly small amounts of money, but they make pretty good impact with those. And then again, that can be leveraged with funds coming from other places. So we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have and go from there.
Mr. Gaines, you tell us every year, but remind us, so when you started, how much money did we get? And it's gone down to this?
Well, we used to have a lot of money. Yeah, a lot of money. Like I said, it used to be close to $700,000.
Yeah.
And it just steady go down. I think 2000 when it really started going heading down, by 2000.
It was actually before Mr. Gaines, and he's our resident expert for sure, but I think we were over 800,000 at one time.
Wow.
And again, all of that just comes straight by formula. So whatever goes in the big pot in the United States and filters down through the formula. So we're very happy to receive funding of any sort, because we know what we get through this once approved by council. We can make an impact in our community. Obviously, we've put many correspondence to our Washington delegation saying, here's what we do with the money you give us. If you can give us more, we can do even more. And we'll continue to do that and want to make sure we make them proud with the money they do send us.
Yes, sir, Ms. Hasty.
Yeah, with the
Mr. Mayor.
money, that's been approved by the president. Do we expect any additional funds for the city from that money?
The 1.9 trillion, yes, sir, there is. So there's multiple pots of money, and there's some preliminary information out already. We've not gotten it directly, but we work with our Washington lobbyists, and then even the municipal association, and I think we've got copies for you tonight in your folders about some of the preliminary information that's coming out. But I talked with the county administrator today, because counties will be getting some direct allocation, cities will be getting some direct allocation, but so will multiple funding sources like airports and libraries and different things. So we kind of have to figure out the complexity of what's going on and what the rules are. And I perceive that we'll be talking probably in a workshop format or something really soon to see what council wants to do on the balance of that. a prime example would be from the first CARES Act, like the Sumter Airport, because they're part of an airport, received some funding that really helped them out, and some of the regulations of their normal funding were relaxed, much like RTA through transit. They received more cash funding. They relieved local matches, and several things. So it's a good time to get a lot done, but we have to be very wise because this is kind of a one-time shot or a two-time shot. But what we've been told is some of those same funding cycles are being funded again, or have been funded through this. It's quite a large pot of money. So we want to figure out what all the rules are and make the best recommendations to council. We'll be doing that very soon.
Yes, sir. Mr. Corley.
Mr. Mayor, on a personal note, I've known Clarence Gaines for 7 or 8 years. Sonny Newman and I met at Hess Station soon after I retired, and he said something about, would you like to serve on some board or, get involved in the city? I said, yeah. Well, a year went by, and then I ended up on a housing board, and that prioritizing, there were 6 or 7 of us in that room, and it's interesting. You've got age, you've got disability, condition of home, so forth, and Mr. Gaines would give us 10 or 12 options and go through them carefully, and then he would say, I want you to help me prioritize this. And it was a very deliberate and careful and thoughtful process. So thank you for your service, Mr. Gaines.
Anyone else? Ms. Reeves, don't want to leave you out. What? No. So how quickly, Mr. McCormick mentioned about that the city typically has to pay out before HUD reimburses. How long is that cycle? But I mean, is it a reimbursement? Is it like 60, 90 days, or do we have to wait? Oh, wow. That's good.
But a lot of times in this process, like the money is not available for a while, so we'll work for several months. So once it's been approved, we'll work for several months because, again, we have a year to get the work done. And you can also get in trouble by having too much money on hand. And in the old days, we used to do these budgets and we would, like, say, do a little bit of street paving. I was telling the mayor earlier, but you can't do a street paving project with a little small budget. So you'd have to hold the money for 2.5 years and then do the project. And then that draws scrutiny on a nationwide level because they've never really been on our level dealing with it. So they said, get it done in a year. So the system is we're quicker getting reimbursed, but there's like a natural flow to it. So it's much better now than it has.
So quicker than FEMA, though. No. Any other questions? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Corley moves, Black Gang seconds. So we adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Workshop is closed. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody. Clarence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Feeling pretty good?
I'm feeling okay.
What's up?
Feel like
Doing good.
we overall.
And then I call.